When someone asks you to do something, when you're asked to learn something new, when you're asked to do something you're certain you can't do, it's by saying the word yes that I have been to places I never dreamed possible and done things I never could have imagined. There will be many times you want to say no, many times you'll be certain you're not up to the task. Those are the very times you have to say yes.
Welcome to Behind the Screens, Conversations with Background Screening Pros. I'm Les Rosen, your host, and I'm excited to have you here. On this podcast, we chat with the people who know the background screening world inside and out. Executives, industry experts, legal pros, and more. We dive into their personal stories and insights to give you a real look at what's happening behind the scenes. Whether you work in the screening industry or are just curious, Behind the Screens bring you the real, unfiltered conversations from the people who make it all happen. Stick around for stories you won't hear anywhere else. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another episode of Behind the Screens, conversations with background screening pros, the folks that make things happen, and talk about someone who is happening and someone who makes things happen. A person who is a recipient of the PBSA Lifetime Achievement Award, a person with a spectacular career in the screening industry, among other careers that we'll hear about, and just genuinely an all-around wonderful person that is great to spend time with. I bring you none other than Judy Gootkind. Judy, welcome to the program.
Hey, Les, how you doing?
I'm great. I'm so glad you're here with me today.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm a little floored with your presentation there.
Oh, well, okay. Hey, so first of all, where am I talking to you from? You are in Providence?
I'm in my home in Rhode Island. Yep. We live at the town of Cranston in Rhode Island, right below Providence.
Oh, that's great.
Near the restaurant that we went to.
That's right. Judy and Lenny took me to took Don and I, and who else was there? It was Christine Coonan.
We called Christine in, and so they came over. You know, we had been dining, and then they came and joined us.
And that was real fun. And my wife is from the Bronx, and your husband is from the Bronx. Had a whole side Bronx conversation going that the rest of us were not privy to.
It's very interesting. It's one of the things I jotted down here to talk about. But, you know, you and I and the migration to where we are today, and it all started at a pre-employment screening conference, and you're on the stage, and you invite Bruce Berg up, and he looks like, pristine in his jacket and tie, and you're a magician. So you cut his tie off. I think everybody's eyes popped open, but somehow you magically put it back together again. But what I also remember, Les, was another time a few years later, maybe, when we were offered to sit in the auditorium, and you were on stage with the original cast of characters to talk about starting an association. And all those yellow pads were across the front of the dais there. And Mike Sankey stood there with the biggest grin on his face. And we all ran up and signed a pad for what committee we wanted to share. But then I go on, because I didn't know you at all, except to enjoy you, be in awe of you. But then, I became very close with Mary Poquette, and we went to our first conference in Arizona. And son of a gun, Mary, I had asked her to come to the pre-employment screening, and she said, well, Judy, I don't know anything about it. And I said, well, I'll tell you all about it. I saw her there, and we said hello, and didn't she walk in with you to the board? Miss Mary and you were on the board. And then the dinner, of course, when Donna said, Lenny, where are you from? And he said, well, where do you think? And she said, Brooklyn. And he said, no, the Bronx. And that's where she was from. And then that was it. That did the whole night.
So that was our dinner in Providence, a great place.
Yes.
And, great memories. Wow.
Well, then we did the New York City run as well, which was great.
But
I digress. Right. Ask me a question.
All right. Well, this is more fun than the podcast. I guess I can go back to my official list of questions now where we can talk about fun things.
Yeah.
Well, listen, let's jump to the chase. What are you doing these days? What is your job, your role, in terms of screening? What's happening with you?
So I'm the Vice President of Finance and Administration with Creative Services, CSI. I'm a member of the executive committee and an officer of CSI. I'm secretary treasurer. Very proud of my contribution to a company that I love. And I appreciate my role and the work that I do.
And you've been there for, what, a couple of years at least? You
I
want to
have been
disclose?
there since March 16th, 1992. I am in my 32nd year, soon to be 33.
And they said it wouldn't last.
Oh, I know.
And there you are.
And here I
So
am.
what do you like most about what you do, or what's most interesting?
You know, I really like the work, the people. I am a people person, and I'm very fond of our staff and the people that I work with. You know, when I started, we were really, Alan is a private investigator at heart. And I know you spoke with him recently. I don't know how well you know him, but you got to know him a little bit.
So that's Alan Sklar. It's okay to use last names. It's not a
Alan
secret
Sklar,
identity.
exactly.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Okay.
He's the founder and president of CSI. And he started as an investigator. And he went out and had jobs. He went to like Central America and he was escorted out of there. But for an example, there was a fellow who was a roofer. And, you know, we had 20 some odd cars and we had investigators out on the street and he was being followed. And we invited him to come in. We were having a birthday party for someone and we invited to come in as a dancer, which he couldn't do at all because his back was killing him, you know. But he came in and he blew his cover and he was dancing up a storm and having a blast. And, you know, that was the end of that. But that's how it was in the beginning when I first got there. And I
It's
got
not
there.
like, let me guess, it's not like that anymore. All right. At least on the
No.
pre-employment side.
We have migrated down, you know, down the path. And, you know, we definitely got ourselves into the background screening and all kinds of steps in between. But that's who we are today.
That's interesting. I mean, when you said he was escorted out of Central America, he was probably thinking, well, I've been escorted out of better places than this, but as the old joke goes. So you've been there for quite a bit.
Yes.
And what was your career path to get to all that?
When I was a senior in high school, I wanted to make some pin money for some holiday presents. My older sister, 6 years my senior, worked for a tax accountant, Ed Bancroft, and she got me a part-time job there. And at first I changed the pages in the books. I mean, we're talking about way back
Right,
before
yeah.
technology was what it is today.
And let's be clear, changing the pages in the books means, for those of you that don't remember that, and will be aghast, is when you used to update yearly, they would actually send you new pages and a table of changes.
Correct.
And you would physically have to take out the old pages and put in the new pages, which is like, you know, driving a car like the Flintstones. So,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So go ahead. I digress.
So that's where it started. But then I learned how to add columns and balance spreadsheets and got into the bookkeeping. He was a tax accountant. And I think that during my college years, I had in my memory is a little vague on that, but I must have gone back and worked there a number of times. But I learned quite a bit from him and I fell in love with accounting. And I went to the University of Rhode Island. I went to the College of Business Administration with a concentration in accounting. So just an aside, it's part of the story. They were in those days, you know, really going back. We had alphabetical seating. And every time I went into a class, my last name was Kestner, Kaestner, and this fellow, Larry Kahn, Kahn. Every time I turned around, he was sitting next to me. So we became hard, fast friends. We went through the 4 years together. He asked me if I wanted to open up a tax practice with him. And I said, well, Larry, you know, how do you see that going? What would we do? And he said, well, you would do the taxes and I'd get the clients. I said, I don't know if I need to do that. So anyway, he went off and did graduate school, but then he came back and then he was very gracious again. He opened up a practice and he asked me to be his partner. And I said, you know what, Larry, I love you as a friend and I want to keep it that way. And so thank you for your offer, but I'm not going to do that. And to this day, we're hard, fast friends. We are very close. So from there,
I have to interrupt and say, I love your comment about you don't quite remember college, because I have to say anyone who can remember did not have a good time.
yes, exactly. Those were the days, right? Those were the days.
So either people claim they can't remember or don't want to talk about them, but one of the two, but we'll let that one go. So
Yeah.
so fast forward, how'd that get you to where you
So
are now?
fast forwarding from there, when I did graduate, I got a job as a bookkeeper, reconciling all the concerts in what was a 99-cent theater, Palace Concert Theater, rock and roll hall. Former Lowe's, really lovely. And now it is the Providence Performing Arts Center. They brought it all the way back. So I had, quite a while there. I brought my boyfriend then, Kenny, soon to be husband, in. And what he did was he read the riders and everything that needed to happen with a band. And one of them was to find a caterer to feed the bands. And so he found this lovely couple, John and Fran Scanlon, and we became their partners. And we started opening restaurants. So we were in the restaurant business for 10 years with catering on either side. We had a
Wow.
restaurant in Providence called City Lights and a restaurant down on the water called, what was it called? I'll get back to that in a second. Down Under. It was called Down Under. So, that was the stroll that got me then. I got out of all of that. I did 4 months at the Division of Taxation, helping people with their taxpayer questions. I was doing the taxes all along. And then Larry Kahn came back into the picture and he got me introduced to Alan Sklar. He brought me,
Wow.
they were a client. See how we went around the circle?
Well, it's a big full circle. I had no idea, and maybe people who know you had no idea that you were you spent 10 years as a restaurateur.
Oh, yeah. Well, so we all had
and-
a role. Mine was accounting and, taking care of the books. John was the chef. He had been schooled in Scotland. Kenny was I don't want to say maitre d'. He was just the bon vivant, he was the celebrity. And then Francine ran the floor and all of the people that worked, our hostess and our waiters and wait staff. But that's how it went. And then I started. It took me 3 months plus of interviewing. I came in and interviewed with this one, and then I interviewed with that one, and then I interviewed with Alan, and then I interviewed with all of them. And then I got the job. And so they needed somebody, just as a sort of a secretarial. And I said, well, my sister worked for IBM. So they said, oh, bring her in. And they shook her hand and they said, you're hired. I said, okay. What's up with that?
And as they say, the rest is history.
The rest is history. You got it.
And you still do, as I recall, a fair amount of tax work.
I do.
Wow.
I have said, I went ahead and I re-upped for this year. And I've said, this is my last year doing taxes. So
What did you re-up as? What?
tax software, you have
Okay.
I have to purchase, what I work on. So.
Okay.
And what happens every year is I start mine, but then everything comes flooding in, and I'm always the last one to
Right.
get it done. And I still haven't done my last year's. I have it all on my dining room table right now to finish.
So you are not only had this fabulous career in the screening industry, but you are also secretly a tax expert as well. You know all the ins and outs.
Yeah,
Oh, that's great.
I have some
Well,
good knowledge there.
Well, after the podcast, I have a couple tax questions for you. But enough about me. That's all right.
Okay.
So with all that history and all that fun stuff, and really fun being a restaurateur. Well, it seems fun in retrospect. At the time, I'm sure it was a lot of work. What was like an early lesson? I always like to ask this question. An early lesson that you learned that has become kind of a mantra that has stuck with you for a long time that you want to share.
So this is something that has stuck with me since forever, since I was little. I must have said something wrong at one point and been horribly embarrassed. But my truth is to always tell the truth, and it'll set you free. And that's it. And
I love
that's
that. My truth is to always tell the truth.
it. Right.
Okay. And nothing but the truth to help you guide. Okay.
That's exactly right. I'm
so-
raising my right hand.
So what early lesson do you swear by?
Well, I will say that I think one of the things for me is I am definitely a people person. I like to meet people. I like to be with people. That has stuck with me for my entire life and to this day, as I walked us through how we met in our, time together. That's really how it happens. I remember when we were at the pre-employment screening conferences, when we actually were there. I went with Stacy Killingsworth and some people have heard this story already, but we were sitting at a table, and usually, I'm not doing it now, but I definitely talk with my hands. So I was there and I was chatting, and I definitely talk. So I was there and I was chatting, and Bon and Ziak with Linda came and stood at the door, and they looked at every table in the room. And unbeknownst to us, I mean, I looked up at one point and I saw them standing there, and then they walked up to the table, and he took one look at Stacy and I, and he said, "We choose you." They sat down, and the rest is history.
And that was Bon and Linda Thurman, right?
And Linda Thurman, you got it.
Yeah,
yes.
exactly.
So
Oh, that's great.
It's been a wonderful, long-time friendship. Bon was, there very early on, and to this day, we remain very close friends.
Oh, that's fantastic. So the walkaway point here is that really, I think what you're saying is the time to take to cultivate relationships and to grow just is worth it. And not just, in a sense of a, personal gain, but just in the sense of it just makes your life better. The more connections you have, the more relationships, it's just more fun, be part of a team and so forth.
Right.
Oh, that's great. So you had all of these different careers and opportunities. You ended up with the screening industry. What do you like about the background screening industry? Why the screening industry? I mean, the world's your oyster, Judy. You could go anywhere, do anything.
Right. Again, my position as finance and administration, HR, again, people and numbers. But I did get involved early on in some meeting with customers. Alan and I would go, if it was a sales call. So I was engaged in a lot of those kinds of things early on. Mm-hmm. As we grew as a company and filled a lot of those positions, I've just continued to move in different directions. I love the evolution over time. I like the growth in the industry in itself and the diversity, the people, the opportunity to mentor. I assisted in reviewing the accreditation after Noelle and her team were finished. We did a review, and then I actually worked on the general, which taking that accreditation, looking at it a number of times through, because I was on the BSCC for probably, I think, 10 years or something. And then we started to work on the general. So I was very engaged in that, and taking it worldwide. So.
Well, that's fantastic. Because there's an alphabet soup here that not everyone is familiar with. The BSCC is, I'll have you say it.
Yeah, background screening CC.
Yeah, accreditation council or something.
Committee.
Yeah,
background screening.
I get lost with the alphabet soup as well. But 10 years doing that, really?
I did.
My God.
I was chair at one point. Yeah, I mean, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 committees listed here that I was on over time. When I was immediate past chair, they actually would place us. So I was placed in international and BSCC in my last year on the board, and then I stayed with the BSCC. So,
and I hope all the listeners are familiar with accreditation, but the accreditation standards, I mean, every word, sentence, phrase, comma, hyphen, all has to be reviewed. So there's a common interpretation, and there's no unintended consequences. So that is laborious, painstaking work.
Well, the fun part was I did it with Laura and Mary Poquette, Laura Randazzo and Mary Poquette. And I think Michelle LeBlanc was with us. So we had a good team, and we certainly had fun with a big effort. So
wow.
It was all good.
Well, at this time, my family coat of arms comes to mind. It's a yellow shield with a big chicken, and in Latin it says, "Better you than me." So I'm thankful that there are people like you and the other folks you mentioned that would do it, because I don't have the attention span. All right.
There you go.
Oh, this takes more than 10 minutes? Oh, I don't think I can do this.
No one would know that of you, Les.
Well, lots of stories here. So a quick question, a game we call Changes and Challenges. We only play it for 30 seconds.
Okay.
Otherwise, it could take several hours.
Right.
And the question is, Judy Gootkind, and top of mind, what's the biggest changes you've seen in the screening industry, and what do you see as the biggest challenges? Go.
So I think technology along the way, certainly for all of us, it doesn't necessarily mean background screening, I think that, all of a sudden we have AI coming in, to our marketplace and trying to understand that and grow with that. And what can that do for us? Consolidation at the top might be a challenge for those who are entering the field to get established. Those are a few. Didn't you say
Okay.
just a couple of seconds?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we could have, hours on that topic, but it's just really interesting to check in with folks who have a lot of experience, a lot of background on
Yep.
this. Well, before we move a little bit more into the next area, with everything you've done, in looking back at your career, and obviously your career is far from over because you
Right.
are well in the
Yeah.
midst of continuing to do marvelous things and always being busy. But what is something that an accomplishment or achievement that kind of pops to mind that really gives you a smile that you're kind of secretly proud about?
Well, there's two that
Okay.
I'll end with, but there's two brief ones. It's kind of how I started because when I got to Arizona and we all went into different rooms and we chose the committee we wanted to be on, I went on what was called best practices, now industry practices. It's where I met Art Cohen. He was sitting across the table and so many others. You and Mary were in your board meeting at that time. And so there were definitely things that I was brave and branched out to do when I got back to Rhode Island. They had taken the day and the month out of the date for in the Superior Court. So you're looking at, the background criminal records and, only partial information was available. So I took it upon myself to call the Superior Court. I knew the judge, actually. He married my daughter and her husband. That was later. But the chief technology office, and then there was a woman, also, and just said, I'd like to come and meet with you and talk to you about that. This is me all by myself, right? So then I wrote a note to Art and I said, so you and the board, here's what I've done and I have a meeting. Can you give me anything I should be thinking about? Crickets, nothing came back. But I went and had that meeting, and it was a bold step. And then one of the greatest things, the Connecticut Department of Public Safety was having a meeting on about 5 different things. But one of them was you needed to be a private investigator to be able to get criminal records from the Department of Public Safety. So I said, I got this. I got this one. And I made a little list and off I went. And I happened to sit next to Montserrat Miller. And it was very early on. It was the first time I met her. And I think it was, really first time stuff for her. So she said, one after another of what we were talking about, people would get up there and say, no, we don't think so. No, they really have nothing to say. And so she said, Judy, do you have, a little more to say when you get up there? And I did. I had written the whole thing. And basically my point was, my name is Judy Gootkind. I work for Creative Services, and we are private investigators, and we're also background screeners. And the punchline was, we are so much more regulated as a background screener than we ever are as private investigators. So I blew their whole thing. And
Oh,
then
fantastic.
the things that happened later on, obviously, I was, invited to be a chair and make it through all of that, and then made it through to be honored, as my words are escaping me now but the Lifetime Achievement Award was really the
Fantastic.
Mike Stanky Lifetime Achievement Award. His wife was there when I went up. I followed you. I must have learned something from you, Les, because I followed in your footsteps. But the other thing that I did was I was at a government relations committee meeting, and Montserrat Miller said, so who's located in District 4 of Southeast Massachusetts? Now, we were not in a meeting, so I just went like this and raised my hand. And that was Barney Frank. And Alan and I went and had a meeting with him, and I testified in front of Congress in a
Wow.
subcommittee about the use of credit in background screening. And it was a House Financial Services subcommittee. We had a conversation, Alan and I, with Barney Frank. We went up to his office on a really hot August morning. But when we got down and into the room where I was going to be testifying, and again, there were a number of us, there might have been 10, and then you're looking at the dais, and then there's the red light, then there's a green light, And when the red light comes, you're finished. But before all that happened, someone came in and asked for us. And they said, Barney Frank would like to speak with you. I'm like, now I had been a little nervous. And the fact that he was calling us into his office to speak, which was amazing. So he remembered the meeting we had, true politician, right? Remembered the meeting we had in his office on that hot day and just kind of talked about the meeting and, and like that. It was really kind of special. And then I testified. So, and then I went to the bar and had a drink at the airport.
Drink. Well, I mean, in all three of those accomplishments, there's just really great. It's a great learning moment for everybody because when you took the initiative and joined the committee, and then you reached out to the Rhode Island group or so forth. What's really impressive about that is that no one told you to or assigned it to you. You didn't ask permission.
No, I know.
You charged ahead and did it, and you accomplished something. And
Yes.
I think that's just so great and so indicative of your leadership and what people can do, particularly at PBSA. Sometimes you just show initiative, and that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I mean, I remember that first meeting. We had these committees, and I just kind of made up committees. At the time as founding chair, I said, all right, we're going to have committees, and these sound right, right? Yeah. I just made them up, and it all kind of worked out, and it all kind of developed. And Art Cohen, you mentioned, and for those who don't know, Art was in the same thing. Art went there, didn't know a soul, and by rolling up his sleeves and getting involved, Art finally became, or was not that long afterwards, at some point rose up and became a PBS chair.
No, and what really I remember about those meetings was that we were all invited to go until they were a closed session, and I would always go. I'd go to the board meetings, and then, when the sessions were closed, off I'd go. Yeah.
And you learned a lot. And the meeting with Barney Frank is just for those of you who don't remember Congressman Barney Frank from Massachusetts, he was a force of nature to be reckoned with.
Oh, yeah.
Particularly when the Dems were in the majority and he chaired those committees, and he ruled the roost. And so you making a connection with Barney was just, that's fantastic. All right,
yeah. So another funny story, just, I'm sorry, because I'm sure.
Go ahead.
I'm going to wind down here one of these days.
Nah, go ahead. It's fine.
I went out to lunch with Alan, and I think it was Stacy again, and I had put a call into him, and I said, tell him he can call me anytime today except during lunch. So he called during lunch, and I'm like, Barney, I used his first name, and I was, a little loud, and then ran out to the parking lot, and, whatever. But it was
that's great. Yeah, I mean, Barney Frank was he's no longer in the House, but he was really a spectacular guy.
Absolutely.
So that brings us to the fact that you were awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award, which is a great honor. Congratulations, because you not only did what you told us about, but I recall listening to the ceremony, and there's so much more. We don't really have time to go into it today. So, So your contributions to PBSA are just legendary. So it's fantastic. So congratulations. Yes, it's so good. So let's turn to PBSA. We kind of talked about it, but what has been the impact of PBSA on your role? How has it influenced your career?
It's been amazing, honestly. It just has made me more certain of the steps that I'm taking. It's opened up so many doors. And, as I said, I was in 6 committees, best practices, now industry practices, government relations, which I still go to those meetings, the BSCC for 10 years. As past chair, but then I am still, they used to have the chair run the finance committee until I became the chair, and I ran the finance committee, and I've run it ever since. So I'm still doing that. I'm chairing the finance committee, which is, again, all about the numbers and what have you. So I think that it's just enhanced all my opportunities, and I've had a wonderful time. It's the people. I mean, we are such a crowd of wonders, really. And I've enjoyed, listening to some of your other interviews, but there isn't anything like when we all get together and we go a day early and we stay a day late and we don't really want to go home right away. We want to, have a good time with each other. And we're a smart bunch. We're a close bunch. And collegial.
That's great. And the really cool thing about PBSA, I've said this before, it's really a meritocracy. I mean, it's not... You talk about you have all these friends, all these people, but someone gets in there and they roll up their sleeves and they're enthusiastic and they have some people skills and they get along. They're part of the group. Anyone can be part of the group. It's a big group. It's a big tent.
Yeah.
And I know that you, in a second, we'll get to that a little bit later, but if anyone ever needs any help or advice, you'd be there for them in a second. Someone
Yeah.
called you up and said, what do you think I should do? Or
Yep.
et cetera, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, this is great. So the PBSA, and I cannot stress how important it is or how much work it is that you have been in charge of the finance committee ever since you stepped down as chair. Because that is we talk about no good deed goes unpunished. I mean,
That's right.
Really, and someday you'll be able to sleep because with everything you do, you can't possibly find time to sleep or do anything else. Right.
I do all right most nights. Not every night, but most nights I settle down.
So let's talk about life beyond screening. I think we all have that. Outside of all the things we've talked about and PBSA, Judy Gootkind, tell us about yourself. What do you do for fun? What's your interest outside of work? What do you like to do? Other than keeping your husband Lenny in line, what do you do?
Right. Yes, spending time with Lenny here at the house. Just again, somebody will call and say, hey, do you want to do this? And I say yes before they've even finished. I don't even know. I'm just an advocate for getting out and about. Dinners like we had together, traveling. I have to say that the joy of my life, the absolute joy of my life, are my two daughters.
Right.
Leah and Brenna and their families and my grandchildren. So I'll be going up there this week, and this happens all the time. They're in Maine. They live in the same town in Maine, one on the east side by the beach, one on the west side in the forest. And they'll call and they'll say, hey, Mom, can you? And before they finish, I say yes. So Leah will be going to Florida, Brooks, and I believe Callie's going with them. They're athletes and they have tournaments and whatever. So I'm going to go up there and hang with Raylan. That's the number 2 grandchild.
All right.
And then following that, I have 10 days up there because Leah and Brooks are going to be going to California for a conference, and then his mother lives out there. So there's a lot of that in my life, and I run to it. I just run to it.
Well, let me guess. You're a 365-day-a-year Christmas shopper for the grandkids, right?
Oh, I wish I did it all year. Really, and when Thanksgiving is only 3 weeks away from the holidays, it's even more difficult. And then it's the wrapping. And then, of course, I kind of overdo it a little bit.
And not to mention birthdays and anniversaries.
Yeah,
and
all of that. I'll tell you one little fun factoid from this year. So Lenny wasn't going to go. He had a knee replacement. He was just going to stay here and relax. And Lee, who is Brenna's partner, that's my younger daughter, called Lenny. And I have a grandson from them. I'll never forget when Brenna said, Mom, I want to have a baby. And I was like, oh my God, that's wonderful. And we have a boy.
Oh, wow.
And his last name is Gootkin, which is great. So he and Lee get on the phone and he comes up really close like this. And he said, Pop Lenny, will you please come here for Christmas? That was it. Lenny had no choice. He had no choice. And we went. But here's the punchline. The punchline is that we heard a scream on Christmas Eve morning from Brenna and Lee's room. And I went running in. I'm like, what's going on? And they said, look. And up at the top of this chimney was a flying squirrel. And there was a squirrel in the house. But then I went back into my bedroom and the squirrel came down, and they have 3 cats and they were just staring at the squirrel under this, hidden away. And then there's a picture of the squirrel later that day, which my other family came over. We did gift opening, and there's a picture of the squirrel on top of this pile of gifts. Cute as face, but definitely not great. We were opening windows, and eventually the squirrel was gone. It must have flown. It definitely went scooting by me, but it must have flown out of a window. But it was the guest that wasn't invited. Anyway.
Lots and lots of great stories. So give us it's time to play fun facts. Judy Gootkind, tell us a fun fact about you that people may not know or guess or just sort of your little secret that you want to reveal that completely unrelated to background screening.
I just don't really, do it anymore. I don't really talk about it anymore. But in 6th grade, again, I lived in Pleasantville, New York, so a little north of the city. And in 6th grade, we were offered to get an instrument and start to learn how to play an instrument. So I chose the flute. And I went through sixth grade and then junior high, taking lessons in school with this Mr. Lockwood. And it was band and orchestra. And I joined the band and orchestra going through high school. And then my sister's brother-in-law was a fellow who had created the Thornwood Fire Department band. And so I even joined their orchestra. And so when I was a senior, Mr. Lockwood came to me and he said, so Judy, you're going to I made it to first chair. And he said, you're going to do a solo at the whatever. I said, oh, no, I'm not doing a solo. I'm not a solo person. I'm not doing a solo. He said, oh, you're going to do a solo. I said, oh, Mr. Lockwood, I can't. He said, you have to, or I will flunk you. And I said,
and your first chair, for those who have not been in
absolutely.
bands or orchestra, if you're first chair, that means you're the top of the heap. You're the number one.
Yeah.
What's the right word? Flutist or flautist? Or you're flouted, you're flutist or whatever?
Oh, flautist, played flute. The punchline is I had a boyfriend at the time, and he and all of his friends sat in the front row with lemons, sucking on lemons. But I was so busy, I didn't really look at them, and it didn't get in the way. But then I actually marched down Fifth Avenue in a parade with the flag or the rifle. And, that one was fascinating as well. So those were my musical career and what came of that.
I would so. Do you remember what the solo was? What?
Of course not. Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Lost in the mists of time.
Right. But I will tell you one more interesting thing. My oldest granddaughter, who just turned sweet 16, has been playing the flute for a few years. And I've gone when I'm up there if she's been playing, and I listen to her. And just this month, she had a solo. Now, hers was very short, and the whole band was all around her. But she played beautifully. She played strong, and every note was perfect. And I was so proud of her. I said, oh, look at this, the next generation. So
you could be the new Jethro Tull. You could sit there with your flute. And
there you go. I have to find it. It's here in the house somewhere.
And for the younger people, a reference to a 70s rock group, Jethro Tull, may not seem all that relevant, but still cool music. But
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, great memories.
That's it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, Judy, this has been a lot of fun, and actually we could probably talk for another couple hours, but we won't impose on your time that way. But let me ask you, given your history in the background screening industry, if someone came to you and they were either thinking of starting the industry or they've been in for a year or two or maybe 5 years and they're trying to figure out how to get ahead or whether it's a good industry to stay in or should they move, what say you? What would your advice be?
Well, what I would do for someone like that is to share my experience. My industry experience has enriched my journey in so many ways that I'm just so grateful for the opportunity that I've been afforded to work where I work, to have colleagues like I have, to grow in two industries. One, to learn taxation and accounting and rise up in that, and one to be at Creative Services Inc. in the background screening industry with all my colleagues there and all my colleagues in PBSA and PBS. So I'm very grateful.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I really appreciate the time spent with, time goes quickly having fun. I can't believe this has been some great information. It's been one of the longest ones, but well worth it. So before we sign off, let me give you based on everything we say, we'll give you the final word. Anything you want to add or any parting words of wisdom? So Judy, the floor is yours.
You may recall this, but when I got the Lifetime Achievement Award, the one major thing, the point that I wanted to get across was to say yes. And so I have it here. When someone asks you to do something, when you're asked to learn something new, when you're asked to do something you're certain you can't do, it's by saying the word yes that I have been to places I never dreamed possible and done things I never could have imagined. There will be many times you want to say no. Many times you'll be certain you're not up to the task. Those are the very times you have to say yes. So that's what I said when I got my Lifetime Achievement Award, and I do believe in that. I am a yes person.
That's fantastic. So there's times you might doubt yourself. There's times you might think you can't do it. There's times that think you have no place even being there. Yeah. But if you have the opportunity, say yes.
That's right.
That's fantastic. Well, This has been just a wonderful time, and some of the people that you mentioned will be future guests in the show, I hope. And it's really fun to hear more about them, so I could cross-reference and hit them up later with things that you mentioned as well.
Well, thanks for the invite. That's what I said in the beginning, and I really do appreciate being here with you today.
No, I appreciate you taking the time, because you're one of the busiest people I know. Well, a lot of busy people are on the show, and I appreciate every one of you. And I know you're particularly busy, so this is fantastic. Yeah. And with that, let me thank everyone for attending this particular program of Behind the Screens, Conversations with Background Screening Pros. And the pro today has been just an absolute delight, Miss Judy Gootkind. Judy, thank you.
Thanks so much, Les. Been fun.
Thanks.
All right, that was yet another wonderful conversation with a background screening pro. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an update. And hey, if you got a moment, we'd love for you to leave us a review. It really helps get the word out. For more info or to catch up on past episodes, or to make suggestions or to suggest possible future guests, head over to our website. Once again, this is your host, Les Rosen, and it's been a pleasure to bring you another episode. See you on the next episode. Thanks.